We have a stealthy solar storm launch that could be partially Earth-directed, and if it hits, it'll be just in time for the peak of the Lyrid meteor shower. Those stories and more in the news this week. This space weather forecast is sponsored in part by Millersville University. Come get certified in broadcast space weather. Visit millersville.edu/SWEN. Space weather this week definitely calms down in terms of solar flux. As we switch to our front side sun, you can see we actually had a couple bright regions at high latitudes and then they started to fizzle out. And then we had a couple bright regions emerge at mid latitudes and then they began to fizzle out. And now we're back to pretty much a spotless sun. So this is the first time that solar flux has dipped down into the high 60s in probably several months. And that's bad news for emergency responders and amateur radio operators, and we're just going to have to deal with this for a short while. However, as we begin to look at the southern region of the Earth-facing disk, you see that dark coronal hole. There was some activity right around late on the 14th into the 15th. You can see a couple puffs, and it looks like we had a stealthy solar storm launch from this region. Now this shows it going kind of east of Earth, but it's really hard to tell. And as we switch to our far-sighted sun, this is stereo A and it's looking at the sun pretty much from the side. You can see back on the 12th, you can see a couple of those bright regions that I was talking about fizzling as they move off to stereo's west limb. And you can also see right about on the 14th, you can see that puff again, just barely on pretty close to the stereo's west limb, and you don't see really any activity anywhere else. So when we switch to our coronagraph view, we can actually tell that there were actually two big solar storms launching on either side of the sun. The one that's moving out on the west side, that is Earth-directed or maybe partially Earth-directed. We just can't tell if it's going east of Earth or west of Earth, and early models are showing it's going to go west of Earth, but it's really hard to tell. But it does look like it might be hitting on the 19th. Meanwhile, we also have a small bright region that looks like it's going to be rotating into stereo's view here over the next couple days, and if so, this may be the reprieve that amateur radio operators and emergency responders need to boost that solar flux back up into the marginal range. Switching to our solar storm prediction model, ENLIL. Now this is NASA's version of the model, and we're looking down at the sun at its north pole. And you can see Earth here is the little yellow circle. Now you can see those two big solar storm eruptions on almost opposite sides of the sun, and they look like they erupted right around late on the 14th, early into the 15th. And the one that is partially Earth-directed looks like it's going to go slightly west of Earth. But remember, those source regions I showed earlier, they look like they're east of Earth. So it's really hard to tell, and that's part of the problem with these stealthy solar storms during solar minimum. It's really hard to tell with these weak signs which way the storm is actually going. So either way, it looks like the storm, if it does graze Earth at all, it should happen sometime on the 19th, and that is great news for you aurora photographers, especially at high latitudes. You might get a little bit of aurora show. Switching to our moon, we are now passing through the third quarter phase on our way to a new moon, with the new moon being on the 22nd. So you night sky watchers, now's a chance to get those really dim objects in the sky, and it's perfect timing for potentially that solar storm that looks like it might be hitting around the 19th and the 20th, and for the Lyrid meteor shower, which should peak on the 22nd. Switching to your solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we have been kind of sitting around unsettled conditions over the past week or so due to some pockets of fast solar wind that have been hitting us sporadically, and these conditions are going to continue. At high latitudes, NOAA is expecting unsettled conditions. However, we do have that stealthy solar storm that could graze us right about the 19th, and if it does, it will also be followed by some more fast solar wind from that southern polar hole that I was showing you earlier. So if that happens, we could actually reach storm levels, possibly about a 10 to 15% chance of a major storm at high latitudes before things begin to settle down. Now, mid-latitudes, we're also only expecting unsettled conditions, but we could have up to about a 15% chance of active conditions if, again, that solar storm does graze us and it's followed by some fast solar wind. So aurora photographers at mid-latitudes, keep your fingers crossed, because if you get a show at all with aurora, it's going to be fleeting. Switching to your solar flare and particle radiation storm outlook over the coming week, everything is still in the green when it comes to big solar flares. We have a spotless sun right now again. I know that's what the story is at solar minimum. So you GPS users, you should be very happy. We have no risk for radio blackouts, and so the GPS reception on Earth's day side should be totally top notch. Sadly though, the spotless sun means we have now dipped back into the high 60s for a solar flux, and that means radio propagation on Earth's day side has hit the dumper. We're in poor conditions, and it's going to be like this easily over the next week until one of the bright regions that we're seeing rotating into stereo's view on the sun's far side, that will eventually rotate into Earth view, and that could then boost us back into marginal range for radio propagation. But again, it's going to take us about a week, and that's just the story, that the way it is during solar minimum. Now also, because we are at solar minimum, the cosmic ray flux is impinging a bit more than it normally would, so you frequent flyers, and this does include aircrew who fly over 800 hours annually and fly at high altitudes and high latitudes, you are in the marginal range for radiation dose, and this does include prenatal passengers, so please take this into consideration in your flight plans. So the space weather this week is a bit of a mixed bag. As far as solar flux is concerned, well, it's the first time we've dropped back down into the high 60s for probably several months, and that's because of this spotless sun we're dealing with right now. So amateur radio operators and emergency responders, well, the radio propagation is pretty much in the poor conditions, and it's going to be like that easily over the next week until a bright region that we've seen in stereo's view rotates Earth's side, and it could possibly give us a bit of a reprieve by bumping up that solar flux again. So just hang in there. Now, on other good news, we do have a stealthy solar storm that looks like it's been partially Earth directed. We don't really know if it's going to the east or to the west of us, but it could graze Earth either way right about the 19th and into the 20th. And this means that aurora photographers at high latitudes, you could easily get some aurora shows starting around the 19th, and even aurora photographers at mid-latitudes, you'll have to get lucky, but there's a small chance that you could see a little fleeting aurora as well. Now, you GPS users, well, for the most part, things are looking pretty good for you. The solar flux is low, and we really don't have any intense solar storms, so your GPS reception pretty much all over the globe should be top-notch. I'm Tamitha Scove, the Space Weather Woman. Thank you for watching.